So I live in a dorm, and I've already lived in the room, and I'm in for all of last semester. Because of that, I'm pretty used to all the normal sounds that occur in the building. My roommate and I just moved back in for the spring semester, and our old suite mates have moved out. Lately, we've been hearing a noise as if a key is being inserted into our door. We always quickly go to open the door since it's usually unlocked and never see a person there. We also check the two empty rooms on either side of us to see if those doors have magically been unlocked. Is there any sane explanation for this? Some extra background info. 1. Like I said, we've lived there before, so we know the noise of the typical movement and the sounds of doors further away sound like. It's not that. 2. Our old suite mates might have left some bad energy. We weren't getting along with them because of how they were treating my roommates and myself, so maybe that caused it. 3. We didn't bring anything new into the dorm that could have caused this. I do own vintage things, but everything that I have that is vintage was also here last semester. And 4. We haven't engaged with whatever it is yet, if it's a spirit besides saying hello, when we thought a person was trying to enter the room. The noise has been happening more frequently at night and is now occurring much more often. It would be in 15 minutes from the last one, so if you know what this could be, please let me know. Just for the record, my family has no record of mental disorders such as schizophrenia or anything like that. In the summer of 2017, I was 15 at the time, I had a very vivid dream of a place that I had never seen in my life. It was weirder than a normal dream. It's hard to explain, but the whole thing felt off. Sometimes dreams feel more like a reality, but this was different. About a week after the dream, I went on a mission trip to Texas. Throughout the week, I would get a sense of deja vu at different places I went. It was the strongest sense of deja vu I'd ever gotten before. It's kind of hard to explain, but it was like deja vu that you could feel down to your core, if that makes any sense. It would come and go throughout the week, but it didn't get crazy until we left Texas. When we got to the panhandle of Florida, we stayed in the gymnasium of a Baptist college for the night. We got there at about 11 or 12 at night. All of us were tired. The deja vu didn't kick in right away, but I was in awe that I had seen this place before too. I kept it to myself because it was weird, and I didn't want to get questioned about it. As I was taking a shower in the locker rooms of the gym, I had realised I had showered there before with the same Sharpie tattoos on my arms. A girl drew Sharpie tattoos on my arms the prior night, and I hadn't showered since then. After that, I brushed my teeth and went to sleep on the gym floor in my sleeping bag. The gym is 2 stories tall and has a balcony overlooking it. Upstairs, a light was on that couldn't be shut off for some reason. I had the urge to go upstairs. It wasn't something that was optional, I had to go up there. My soul was strongly set on going up there. I see my youth pastor walking to the water fountain in the corner of the gym and tell him that I had a strong urge to go upstairs. He was concerned and confused obviously, but me, him and one other adult went upstairs in the elevator. When we got there, I was walking through the exact dream that I had a week prior. I recalled everything that I had seen. After looking around for a few minutes, we decided to take the elevator back down. The other guy that was with us stepped in first, and as soon as he was in the elevator, the doors immediately shut. That's not normal elevator behaviour. My youth leader even tried pulling the doors before they shut, but had to let go before they crushed his hands. We took the stairs and met the other guy on the bottom floor. He went to bed, and I went to talk with my youth leader. I explained to him that I had insanely strong deja vu, and even as I was talking to him, I felt like I'd had the conversation before in the same spot and everything. He didn't know what to do, so we just prayed and we both went to bed. The next part was the scariest thing to ever happen in my life. Remember the whole schizophrenic thing mentioned in this post? This is the point where I thought I'd lost it. I started hearing whispers around me, indistinct as if they weren't speaking English. They would close in around me, and when I looked towards the source of the noise, it would come from somewhere else. Then footsteps, coming from different places and disappearing when I looked at them. I heard a low hum as well. I cried and clutched a rock with a cross drawn on it that I had got from Texas. I eventually faded into sleep. I honestly don't know how. The next day, I woke up and told no one about the voices and such. When I left, I recognized the buildings of the college campus vividly, just like at the end of my dream, like 2 weeks prior. Since then, I've had periodic dreams like this. No voices or anything like that. Usually, when I get them, I'm doing something out of the ordinary. For example, going to a football or hockey game, nice restaurants, drinking or smoking, etc. Last week, I had a premonition almost every day. My theory on why I've had this happen: I'm connected to a spirit or some supernatural force. Over the summer, I was screwing around listening to satanic hymns lying in bed with my eyes closed. I felt like I was floating and had goosebumps and chills. Scary stuff. It was also around the time I had the original premonition. I've had many premonitions, so many I've lost count. I'm keeping them to myself so this post isn't too long, but if people are interested, I'll do a follow-up or answer any questions that people have. Last Sunday, I went over to one of my best friends' houses to talk about the premonitions that I've been having as of late, as well as some drama. A little background to my friend. She's had a connection to the spiritual realm for about the past 10 years, after her father committed suicide when she was 7. I can't say the reason because I'm one of the few people who know, and I swore I wouldn't. All I can say is it wasn't due to the supernatural. She also has a connection to animals. This is an important detail. I trust her with my life, and she trusts her life with me. We've known each other for a year and a half, after my premonition started when school began. We got deep into conversation and talked about my premonitions and how they've been more frequent lately, and how more and more people seem to be getting them as late. She's going through a rough time, and she told me occasionally she has a seance to contact her dad to guide her. She hasn't done this for some time, and wanted me around for the next time she did it. We said we'd do it another day. We continued to talk for some time until her dog stood up right on the bed. Her dog, Moxie, had been lying down, with ears perked and stared at the corner. My friend has done many seances in the past, and her dog would let her know when a spirit was nearby acting like this. My friend told me it was mine. I know that she's done this before, but she's never told me what exactly happens and how she starts to interact with the spirit. She walked over to a candle in the corner of the room and lit it. She also grabbed a small crucifix and a feather. She explained that she heard it means a deceased relative is near. She also just kind of has a thing for feathers, and held them in her hands. She started talking to the spirit, asking for guidance, hoping that it was her father because she hadn't contacted him for some time. After about a couple of minutes of nothing happening, the temperature dropped what felt like 10 degrees. The fan was off, and the AC didn't turn on either. Dogs started barking outside a couple moments later. Suddenly, we heard the voice of a child. It sounded like a little girl. It said my friend's name. My friend lost focus and the spirit left. The room returned to its normal temperature, however the corner was still cool. I stopped writing this post for a bit, but I'm with my friend right now, and she explained that she's been seeing a small handprint on her mirror whenever she got out of the shower, on and off for the past year or so. She says she hasn't had any younger family members die. Whatever spirit we contacted, it definitely wasn't her dad. She says that she started seeing the handprints since she moved into her house, over the summer after her freshman year. I met her the sophomore year. The area that she lives in is recently developed, and her family are the first owners of the house. The spirit's never done anything harmful, and she doesn't feel uncomfortable with it. The woods by her house. I love the woods. They never bothered me. I was in Boy Scouts for 5 years, and I've never been creeped out by the woods. I've been alone in the woods, and it's never been an issue. But those woods are different. I've never been in the woods, but I've been just outside the woods. One time, I was waiting for my girlfriend's mom to fall asleep so she could sneak me in for a booty call. She told me to wait by the woods in my car. When I was there, I felt like I was being watched and I felt very uneasy. I didn't feel safe at all. I didn't want to get out of my car. To be honest, I repeatedly made sure that my car was locked and I shrunk down in my seat a bit. Afterwards, I talked to my girlfriend about it. She mentioned the woods in the past, but I didn't think it was those particular woods. She told me some of the experiences she's had in the woods. I trust my girlfriend, and I don't think she'd make up that kind of stuff. She's not that type of person, but I'm more of a believer if it happens to me or I witness something. She told me a few experiences. One time, she was in her car with her ex by the woods. I'm pretty sure it was the same spot I was at, and they both heard a bone-chilling scream. It was off in the distance, so it was faint. It sounded like a woman's scream. She's heard it a few times. She's also seen white humanoid figures with long arms. She told me that she and some of her friends went into the woods and would leave each other alone for a bit, as sort of a game. When it was her turn, she felt like she was being watched in all directions, and she heard leaves rustling like something was moving. It was only for 5 minutes, then her friends came back. When it was her friend's turn, they found him in a fetal position with scratch marks on his arm. They weren't too deep. Once they found him, they helped him up and booked it out of the woods. Despite the stories and being too afraid to get out of my car, I didn't really have a reason to anyway. I went to go and investigate for myself. I sure as hell won't go alone, but my girlfriend is done with those woods. There's no way she's going back. If I ever do go into those woods, I'll record what I find and share it. Her house. I haven't seen all that much happen in person. Most of it's been over FaceTime. I've only seen a couple things for myself. Others she'll tell me. We FaceTime late at night so she can sleep. My presence relaxes her, just knowing I'm there. One time when she was dead asleep, I saw the blanket slide off her a bit. It wasn't moving or anything. The blanket just got pulled off her slowly. Maybe an inch or so. Creepy to say the least. Her phone was also moved on its own while I've been on FaceTime. One time, I heard tapping on her screen, and I thought she was doing it to mess with me. I told her to knock it off because I was trying to sleep too. I looked over at my phone and she was facing away from the phone and asleep. Those are the personal experiences I've had. Some of the things she's told me are creepy as hell, but I'm not quite sure if I believe them. The really creepy stuff started happening a couple weeks ago. She went to her dad's house about 3 hours north in the middle of nowhere. When she came back, she started hearing footsteps running across her room late at night. She also hears laughing and crying. She feels like she's being watched, and she says that she'll see a little girl hiding behind her closet door. She has a dresser next to her closet and it leaves a little gap. That's where she says she sees the girl. The past few nights, she hasn't been able to sleep at all. I don't know if there's really a little girl like I said. I haven't witnessed it myself, but whatever's going on, it's keeping her up at night. When I spent the night at her house though, I heard knocking on the window. She has a fenced-in backyard. The fence is one of those tall plastic ones that would be very difficult to get over. The creepiest part is the knocking always happens during the witching hour, and it's always 3 seconds. Sometimes rapid and sometimes slower. She says it's every night, and one time I checked, it was 3:20. All I know is every time it's between 3 and 4. There's no way that it's a tree or anything. If it was, the fact there's only one knocking around a specific time, and only 3 times, is highly unlikely. However, hopefully, whatever's in her room doesn't follow her. We're looking to get an apartment together at the end of the year. In the meantime, at least, is there anything I can do to ward off whatever negative energy or entity is there? I read somewhere that 3 knocks is a sign of a demon, but I'm not sure of anything like that. If it were, what could I do? Before I was born, the 4 of them used to hang out a lot. They would often drive far out into the Mojave Desert to just party and drink around a fire and have a good time. Anyway, for this story, I'm going to call my dad Conrad and my mom Stacy, and their friends I'll call Brad and Gina. So they drive away into the desert to have a fire. It's summertime, it's hot. Although it's the middle of the night, it's definitely not cold. Well, my mom Stacy and her friend Gina were starting to get scared about tarantulas and decided they didn't want to camp out there after all. So all four of them started driving back. It's like 2 a.m. They were on a dirt road that went on for miles and miles with nothing on it. Suddenly, up ahead in the headlights, they saw a man in a long black trench coat with a wide-brimmed hat, and the collar of his coat pulled up, walking along the side of the road going the same direction they were driving. My dad grew up hitchhiking a lot and used to pick up hitchhikers as well, so my mom knew my dad would consider stopping and talking to this guy to see if he needed a ride. But they got a terrible feeling about him. My mom always said that the way he was walking, the way he looked and was dressed, and how he was out in the middle of nowhere, he was just emitting this really messed up energy that felt absolutely terrifying and even evil. Gina felt the same way. My dad starts joking, "Hey, let's pick this guy up." And my mom and Gina immediately start screaming and crying and begging him not to. They were in the back seat, my dad driving and Brad in the passenger seat. Gina was even punching my dad in the back, screaming, "No, don't stop." I guess my dad slowed way down as he passed him, and they all turned to look at him as they went by. However, the moment that they passed him, he was gone. It was as if he disappeared into thin air. It's not like there were rocks or trees to hide behind, and the weird thing is, I grew up hearing this story from my parents, but living far away from their friends. When I was very young, we moved up north, and they lost touch. Although whenever we'd come back to California to visit, we'd always get together with them, and it was like nothing had changed. I moved back here to California as an adult, and I work for Gina now. One of our first conversations when I came back was about the Hat Man. She brought it up, not me, and she said word for word the exact same story that my parents always told me growing up. My university that I go to was built in the late 1800s, and the dorm I lived in was built in the 40s or 50s. The dorm itself has had many students commit suicide. There was one incident that was bad enough where it was covered by news outlets. The school itself informed those attending the school. If you attend a public university in the US, you more than likely know that universities tend to hide and not publicly discuss things like this unless it's very bad. Obviously, rumours of this dorm being haunted circulate to the entire university. When you tell someone that you lived or live in this dorm, they automatically ask, "Have you ever had anything happen to you or anything?" I've had many instances of something happening while I lived there. Every night, the door would open and slam shut. We weren't the only residents who were having issues with this either. We kept our doors locked during the night, so we were always freaked out on how this was happening, especially after we found out it wasn't the hall's RA. There was another time when my friends and I were sitting on the futon watching TV. The plastic signs that hold the fire escape plan on the back of the door flew off and into the living area, which was a good 12 feet away from the door. The door and living area was separated by a sink area. My Alexa would also randomly go off and play music, or say it couldn't hear what I said, etc., when the room would be completely silent. These are the small things that happened while living there. I had 2 main encounters I had while living there that still bothers me to this day. First one, I had to go pee during the middle of the night. Backstory. On the girls' bathroom on my floor, someone had committed suicide in the huge bathtub, which I didn't find out till last year. When I was walking to the bathroom, it felt like someone was watching me, but I brushed it off as me being paranoid because I'm walking to the bathroom at 3 in the morning. While I'm in the stall, I hear a sniffle. Don't think anything of it because it's a community bathroom that 30-ish girls share. I go to leave and I hear a bathroom stall slam shut and sounds kind of like water running. I check around the bathroom real quick. I was completely alone. I speed walk back to my room. When I walk out the doorway of the bathroom, I hear footsteps, so I peek out the corner of my eye and see a dark figure, and I look more to see what it is. There was nothing. Then I hear a door slam shut behind me. No one was there. I sprint into my room and locked the door and hid under my blanket like a 5-year-old who's scared of their closet. About 2 minutes pass, and I hear my door shake and items on the top shelf in my closet fall and fly out. I had to call my friends and go stay with them that night. I lived in Fort Riley with my wife for about 2 years. Fort Riley has a reputation of being a very haunted base. I'm used to paranormal stuff. I've had countless experiences since I was a little kid, but nothing as intense as what I've experienced there. Me and my wife were brushing our teeth in the bathroom in the corner of our bedroom. Seemingly out of instinct, we both looked over at the same time to see a dark cloud hovering above our bed. We dismissed the encounter at first, but shortly after that, some of the weirdest experiences we've ever had started to happen. It started off simple, like seeing shadows and hearing things. But one night, my wife had gone to bed and I had stayed up to finish packing for the field. I started to hear my wife start bawling, like she just saw her family die. I run into the room to see if she's okay, and she's sitting there on her phone with earbuds in, completely fine. I told her about it, and she told me I was probably just tired and hearing things. I believed that until the exact same thing happened again. Except I was in bed and she heard me bawling, only to find me in the room reading completely fine. It got worse after that. After the first few days, everything started to happen extremely often. Constant voices and shadows. I could knock and ask whatever it was to knock back, and it would sometimes. One time I was ordering pizza. I went and answered the door, and as I was paying, I glanced over to clearly see my wife walking into the kitchen. After I paid, I walked into the kitchen, but no one was there. A similar situation occurred on her account, though she refused to talk about it, so I don't have any details on it. Basically, she saw me at home while I was actually at work. Mind you, this all takes place within the first 5 days or so. We started getting used to it, with experiences happening every day. We just learned to ignore them, knowing it was going to hurt, right? Wrong. My wife started waking up with random cuts and bruises all over her body. She said she had nightmares about somebody scratching her. We realised that we had to do something when we woke up to some cuts on the wall that exactly mirrored her self-harm cuts on her stomach from years ago. So we saged the house, did a protection spell and hung up protective sigils, and it worked. We should still have paranormal experiences, but nothing crazy. We felt a peaceful presence of whatever was left behind. We believed that there were multiple spirits and this one was there to protect us. But after a few months, all paranormal activity just stopped, almost completely. I need to get this out, leaving out some identifying details. I was visiting for an alumni event at my former college in Kentucky, which is about 16 hours from my house in Texas. There was a hurricane on its way and I needed to head back south. I was leaving at close to 7 p.m. to avoid the storms and had routed my journey home. I was by myself and usually used the main highways. This time, I had to take a detour to avoid the path of the storm which had hit Louisiana. This detour, for the life of me, I can't remember the route. I was in Tennessee at this time and had to go across a state instead of down. This detour involved a particular foresty area where the trees were over the road and the roads were really bendy. I drove slower due to it beginning to rain and I didn't want to go off the road. I do not remember the road at all. I turned a bend and there were 2 people moving from the road. My headlights hit them. This all took place in less than 10 seconds and my brain was moving so fast. I can't remember what the other person looked like. I just know there were 2 people. My headlights hit the woman. This woman had on shorts and a pink spaghetti-strapped t-shirt. She was walking away from the road and my first thought was, oh my god, I almost hit her. Next, she turned and I was thinking, why is she on the road? And not even a second into that thought, I realised that she had no face. My thoughts were going a million miles an hour because this person with no face was on the road. I kept driving and kept thinking, don't stop. She had no face, don't stop. I hit the rearview mirror up, afraid if I looked in the back seat that she would appear. I was speeding at this point and wanted out of there. I don't know what road I was on. I've looked online for this, like a woman died on a bendy road in these close. I still have nightmares. When I was around 14 or 15, I had a very good friend who lived down the street. We were kind of oddball kids, really had an interest in paranormal stuff. We were always in the library looking at the paranormal section. Even at 30, I'm still really reading about people's experiences and learning about folklore and the like. I spent a lot of time at his house playing video games, hanging out, etc. Always felt comfortable there. The way his bedroom was situated, it was at the top of the stairs and was directly above the garage. Important later. Well, one day, he tells me he's tried his hand at white magic. To this day, I still don't know what that means exactly. He got really into Wiccan stuff as time went on, and that wasn't something I wanted to partake in. Nowadays, I think he runs a tarot card business. He said he tried something. I don't remember what he was trying to accomplish or how he tried to go about it, but ever since that point, he said he had strange occurrences in the house. Every night, he'd hear a banging on the floor of his bedroom, as if someone was hitting the ceiling of the garage. He's noticed shadows, whispers in his sleep, figures walking into his sister's room located next to his room. He wasn't exactly having fun with his white magic anymore. I spent the night at his house. Everything was very odd about it. It wasn't a warm place that I remember feeling welcome, and not a week beforehand. Since he had just gotten back from school, he took his dog out like he typically did. I stayed behind to get the video games ready. His mom usually didn't return until much later in the evenings, so it was just us. I went into the bathroom. As I was washing my hands, I heard a loud banging on the bathroom door. Bang, bang, bang. I was petrified. I didn't want to open the door. Every time I found the courage to try to grab it, the door handle would move and then reset. Like someone was about to open it and then let the door handle go. This happened 3 times. In between it would jiggle like someone was playing with it. I heard my friend enter the house, and knowing that I wasn't alone, I found the courage to finally leave. Told him about it, but he wasn't surprised. It seemed to be taking a toll on him in a way. After a long evening of gaming, we decided to go to bed. I slept on the floor of his bedroom. I woke up to the feeling of a banging underneath my head, like someone was banging the ceiling of the garage beneath us, right under my head, 3 times. It would stop for a few minutes and start up again. I also woke up 3 times in the night, and I still get chills thinking about it. I woke up to what felt like someone was whispering in my ear, followed by a cold sensation. It was the voice of a male saying the words, "Just quit." Just quit. I still don't know what that means. It was so sharp and stern sounding. 3 times I woke up, 3 times I heard those words. Not as dramatic sounding when I write it down, but maybe someone might know more about this kind of thing. I returned to his house a couple of times after that, but stopped eventually. I didn't like the shadows that I would see, or the stories he would tell me about the night before. Suddenly, the paranormal seemed a lot less fun. I think it really took a toll on his sister too. His theory was he'd opened up a portal, but I know nothing of things of that nature. Anyways, that's my story. Maybe someone can relate to it. I've always believed in the occult. My mother told me when she was a child that her house was haunted and that she would see doorknobs turning and hangers swinging in a room. Other family members confirmed this, saying they heard screams. In her 30s, she found out the previous owner had committed suicide outside her room. She also said she'd seen figures in her house and on her body. A woman on her chest and a bird-like figure whispering in her ear. So I've always been sensitive to spiritual beings and prayed for protection every night. In my childhood, I had nightmares almost every night about spirits hovering over my body or being in the house. Fast forward to the present. My father passed away 1 month ago. I'm 21 years old and he's 70. I was living with him until he passed away in the hospital. Now I live alone in his house. While I lived there, he would always close the door separating the small hallway from the living room after I fell asleep. It's a folding door. The first time since he's passed that I woke up and that door was closed, I swore it was a fluke that I closed the door and simply forgot. But I made a promise to myself not to close the door again because it still scared me. This happened about a week ago. Even more weird, yesterday the garage door was open when I woke up, although I've barely stepped foot in the garage. I thought someone had broken in, so I called the police. Upon arrival, the police said the door was opening and closing on its own until I came out of the house to greet them. And finally today, I woke up after the garage door incident last night, and the door in the small hallway is closed. I did not close it last night. Honestly, I'm scared to be alone here. Beyond this, I've only experienced minor things. While living with a roommate in my apartment, things moved on their own. The washer slid across the counter, and I saw a can shaking vigorously through one of the others were. I have reason to believe that something spiritual, ghost, demon or otherwise is present within my house, or within me. I've tried to contact priests in the area for a consultation, in addition to installing cameras this upcoming week. Is there anything more immediate I can do to cleanse the house or myself? Any advice, information, or similar experiences are appreciated. The first thing we noticed was strange sounds. Nothing too loud or concerning. At first we thought it was normal apartment noises, but we never had that before. I'm talking about random small bangs and door noises, footsteps and clicking. At first we thought it was the neighbours, but we've lived here for a year and never heard that. We also smelled certain smells that don't have a source. My girlfriend smelled a rotting smell in our room that came from nowhere. I also sometimes smell something nostalgic in the room too. There's also been electronic problems, like our TV has been glitching a lot. It's a smart TV, so it's not the most stable, but YouTube has been closing on its own, or disconnecting our phone from it. I've also seen lights flicker. The rest of these things happened while we were high, but it's not something that happened to only me or my girlfriend. We both heard this. It was really late at night. Can't say a specific time, but it was past 12 AM. I heard the water turn on in the bathroom by itself, and so did my girlfriend. I dismissed it when I was high, even though it scared me a little, but there was no one else in the house with us. The worst thing that happened was Saturday night. My friend was staying over, we'll call him A, and he can account for the weird noises. Me and my girlfriend took edibles while A stayed sober. We were on the couch watching TV when we all heard a loud bang from the door, as if someone rammed into it. Cops were called, they checked outside the apartment but found nothing. No sign of break-in attempts. I don't want to believe there's a ghost or anything, but I don't know what else could be happening. Hoping somebody here can help. This took place prior to the demon. It's much more tame. This is the story of how I first ever had an out-of-body experience as a child. I had literally just turned 6 years old. Myself and my family had gathered at my grandmother's house for a birthday party, and we were all going to stay the night. Looking back, my dad was probably too drunk to drive. I was asleep in the bedroom where I had to share the space with my younger brother. I woke up very suddenly. Like, 1 minute I was sleeping soundly, and the next I was standing up out of the bed. I had no idea why I woke up, but when I checked the clock, it was just a few minutes after 3 AM. I'm well aware of what that time means in some cultures, but I wasn't sure back then. From the moment I was awake, I heard talking. It kinda sounded like you were listening to a really old radio. The sounds weren't actually there, but they were all around me. I was hearing people I knew mixed with people I didn't know. None of them were talking to me. I followed the sound down the stairs and thought maybe my dad fell asleep with the TV on. No. He might have, because he was sleeping in the reclining chair, but the thing wasn't on. I looked around and found nothing that might make the noise. It didn't get louder or lower, no matter where I went. I tried to wake my parents, and neither would wake up or even respond at all, as if they were dead. But in this state, I also knew they weren't, so I didn't panic. It took some time before I heard a thumping sound upstairs. Something loud, like if you dropped a bowling ball. Then I heard a shout come through that static noise, but I can't fully recall what it said. Something along the lines of get back or go back, though. At that point, I started to go up the stairs, but before I reached the top of the stairs, I just woke up again. This feels like a dream, I know, but really, the weird and creepy parts happened after I woke up. First, I woke up and saw that the time was accurate. It was around 3:10, so a few minutes had passed just as they did in the supposed dream. Second, when I woke up, my ears were still kind of picking up a lot of static. It felt like that feeling when your ears are ringing, but instead of high-pitched, it was deeper static that formed a voice. I was hearing a lot going on, like there was so much background noise it was drowning out the main thing. But then I finally listened closely enough to hear it saying, "You did it. You did it. You're awake. You did it." Stuff like that over and over. Whoever it was seemed relieved. It might be important to note that I didn't wake up in a panic or anything. It was just like opening your eyes in the morning feeling rested and calm. However, the noises I was hearing made it difficult to go back to sleep. The third thing that tied it all together was what I heard in the dream. Like I said, voices I recognised were there, but not of people who were in the house. When I got up the next morning, those people had come to visit my grandmother. They were distant cousins who were much older than me. One of them brought their new boyfriend, and another of them brought a friend who had a kid around my age, and they thought we'd get along. Those were all of the voices I had heard. I never met these people before, so I have no way of knowing those voices. The stuff they were talking about was the same as what I overheard in the dream. But finally, the weirdest part about the whole thing was when my parents were talking at the table while my brother and I played with the visiting kid. I overheard them all say they had a weird dream last night. They all said they were starting off with normal dreams, and then they heard me calling. Everything went black and they couldn't move, so they had some sleep paralysis, but they could hear me saying their names and felt me shaking them. They said it seemed so real, they woke up afterwards in a sweat, thinking something had happened. They also got weirded out by how similar their dreams were, and eventually, one of them asked, "But did any of you recognise that voice that told them to go back?" And my dad said no, but after that was when I was able to wake up and caught that asshole trying to break in. So we were out by a fire for the first night, and everyone was wide awake, and ready to chill for the long weekend. So we decided to tell ghost stories because we're dumb. Keep in mind, it's about 9:30 to 10 p.m. at this time. We start telling our own ghost stories, but after a while they get boring, and we go onto Reddit for some ghost stories. We read part of one, but it wasn't scary, so we stopped. And this is the point where I got up and was like, "Hey, look at the thing in the bushes over there." Of course I was joking, but then people started seeing things moving. And even people who are very down to earth, not just me. I have a very vivid imagination, and we hear noises. Pretty freaked out because it's dark and spooky, so we decided to go to bed quickly. But all throughout the night, I heard footsteps and howling. I think the howling was from the young group of kids camping next to us, but it still added to the atmosphere. The winds were blowing strongly that night, and it was cold, and no one got much sleep that night. On the second night, it was pretty much the same story as the first night. Just footsteps and howling, and occasionally seeing things moving in the darkness. Nothing new happened, but people were just freaked out and worried about things. Now we wove onto the third night, which was the freakiest of them all. It starts off the same as the last two, with people joking about the man in the bushes. And then, of course, people start seeing things and panicking. By now it's about 10:05, and we start getting ready for bed. All the girls get up and go to the toilet, and it's just me, my friend Spencer, and my half-friend Brandon. Brandon gets up to supposedly go to the toilet, but both me and Spencer assume he's going to prank the girls. So the girls come out of the toilet when Brandon is still there, and there was the word "help" written in big letters on one of the poles, or so I was told. The girls all kind of freak out and say that it's Brandon, and walk back to the camp, where one of the girls is really freaked out and starts wanting to go home, and wishing they never came to the camp. Both me and Spencer were thinking it was Brandon, but he kept denying it profusely, which was odd, because he always admitted after he pulled a prank. But this time, he kept denying it, even to the adults of the camp. This causes Spencer to start thinking Brandon wasn't lying, and then he starts freaking out a bit. I've had bad anxiety and paranoia and a very vivid imagination, but I always put something down to science and logic. I'm the sort of person that always has an explanation for everything, and I start saying, if you were being chased or in danger, would you have the time to write help on a pole? Of course people listen, but they all freak out. Then one of the girls offers to show me the help sign and why they thought it was Brandon. But when we got there, the help sign had completely disappeared. I had absolutely no explanation for this and I started to freak out. To calm myself down, I made up a lie like, charcoal gets soaked into wood after a certain period of time, even though I knew it was a blatant lie. It was only like 5 minutes later when I went to have a look. We all went to bed and surprisingly, I slept well. This is now the last day we're on the camp, so we start packing up. We're told to go clean the toilets, and this is where all the relatively creepy things have been happening. We started sweeping and cleaning out the toilet block, but every cubicle felt like something was in it, and I constantly felt like I was being watched. As we swept, someone threw gum nuts through the bars. So I went out to yell at the person, but there was no one there. This happens a few times until I'm outside and one of my friends yells out that they saw a gum nut get thrown through the window and I'm only seconds away from the edge. So I sprint around and nothing is there. For reference, this window was only about 20 centimetres tall and the nearest gum tree is across the road. This freaks me out. And I go back inside to finish sweeping. My friend had left to go talk to the girls, so I was alone in the bathroom. And when I turned the corner, I saw a distinct shadow figure standing in the corner, before walking into one of the cubicles and disappearing. It was about my height. It had long scruffy hair and a blank expression on its face. It walked with a long gait and disappeared as soon as I looked in that cubicle. I left the toilet quickly, but the next time I walked in with my friend Spencer, the cubicle that the shadow man walked into, its toilet was flushing. Me and Spencer sprinted out of there and didn't go back in for the rest of the camp. We left later that day. When I was 14 in 2020, July or August, not sure when it happened, I got my PS4 and was sat up in my living room at the time. I never believed in any spirits or demons and I was like, yeah, ghost, no, that's bullshit. Around the same month, I was going through a lot, depression. In our house right now, there's no mirror facing a mirror, vortex. I then placed my PS4 down onto the table and plugged it in. When I plugged it in, I got a strong feeling that someone is watching me. After that, I turned my head and I saw a white figure about 5'6" staring at me through a creak in the doorway. Had no hair, no nose, no mouth, long fingers, no clothes, no private parts. Black eyes, like pitch black eyes. Stared at this figure from across the living room. I then pivoted my whole body around and said, hello? I was staring this thing dead in the eye and talking to it, giving me a confusing look. I then proceeded to walk towards it, and then the right side of his body started showing. And then I saw long fingers. Right arm, right leg, right side of torso and the face. It just stood still, following me with his head turning. Then this figure started bolting. I saw the bolting movement and I proceeded to run through the hallway, checking every room in the house. I even called out to my sister and my parents, and they were in their rooms. I heard no shutting of a door. Nothing. Could someone please tell me what I saw? If it was a demon or just a spirit passing by? This is 100% a true story. This happened to me a while ago, and I've been very curious about it. I wanted to share it here to see if anyone has had similar experiences or any insight on the subject. So I was having a pretty regular dream. I was living in a very small village and I had entered a wrestling competition. At some point in my dream, I became conscious of the fact that I was dreaming and decided, since it was a dream and it didn't really matter, I was going to strangle my opponent to death. Definitely unusual behaviour for me. I'm not a violent person, but for some reason I did this and it was satisfying to me. Then it got kind of weird. Everyone in the village became very upset with me. People were yelling insults at me, lots of people ran and hid in their houses and would turn off the lights when I'd walk by. I kept thinking, this is just a dream. Why is everyone so upset with me? I kept trying to change the dream, but it wouldn't change. So I walked into a bar where one of my friends was working, and I started telling him about my situation. And suddenly, something just felt very wrong. It was as if my dream was a set and someone had just walked on completely out of character. I heard a knock on the door and I opened it, and it was this man that immediately struck me as a very unfamiliar face. He was very pale and sort of had a glow to him. He was semi-bald with short brown hair on the sides. I don't know if he just kind of looked like a white guy in his late 40s, but he struck me as very unfamiliar. I said, I don't think you're supposed to be here, and he said, I'm not. But you need to know that the things you do here matter. They're an important reflection of your subconscious, and the decisions you make here have real consequences. I was shocked. I just kind of stared at him and he said, you look like you've seen a ghost. Watch this. Then he aged rapidly and just looked really old. Then he went back to normal and he said, do you want to see a memory? He opened the door and I saw my cousin's old house accompanied by the sound of someone playing piano. We walked towards the house and he said, go inside. I have to go now. I said, I have so many questions, and he just waved, started running away from me and vanished. I went inside and just relieved a very basic memory of being at my cousin's house as a kid. It all felt so real and just insane. I've never had an experience like that in my life, and I do not believe my brain just made all of that up. I could never normally just recall a memory in a dream like that either. I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts on this and any similar experiences. My dad, L, passed away in 2003. My niece, N, was born in 2017. One day, I was picking her up from school. They were doing construction on the road we would usually take home, so I had to take a back way which took us by the cemetery. We drove by it and she goes, that's where my grandpa Johnny is. That's right. I remember him. You do? Yeah, before I was born, he took me to the Rainbow Park. The only park she's ever gone to is the one by my sister's house that she calls the Blue Park because, well, everything is blue. There are no parks around me that I know of that I would consider rainbow. The Rainbow Park? What's the Rainbow Park? The one in the clouds. He was really nice and tall and fluffy. Wow, that was nice of him. Did you have fun? Yeah. He lived in the clouds and he said he'll always watch over me. And Mom. And Grandma Michelle. And you, Aunt Elle. He loves me. I love him. My sister and my mom had no idea what she was talking about. They also agreed that they knew of no Rainbow Park. My sister is also not religious, so there was never any talk of Dad being in the clouds or anything like that. I've always been a skeptic. Eldest child, atheist in a Christian household kind of skeptic. Even though my mother has told me a plethora of stories of encounters that she and my grandmother have had with the paranormal. Skepticism aside, I've always felt uncomfortable about the upstairs section of my childhood home. We moved there when I was quite young and we didn't know much about the history of the house, besides that it was owned by an author who may have practiced some sort of alternative child raising models. Nothing malicious, I'm sure. It was also said to be the first house built on top of the hill that forms the middle of the suburb. The hill used to be a popular dumping site for the corpses of horses and other dead farm animals, since the vultures would make quick work of the cleanup. There's also evidence of early human settlements and stories of tribal warfare that took place on the land. Anyways, the upstairs area consists of a lounge and a study. The house was built very much in the cliché 70s style, with lots of carpets and exposed brick in indoor areas of the house. The bedrooms were on the lower level of the opposite side of the house. Now, as a young child, it was natural to fear the dark, except I had an exceptional fear of the upstairs. I would have recurring dreams of being caught upstairs and being unable to move or scream for help. It didn't help that I would sleepwalk and would sometimes end up outside, or even upstairs. Whenever I had to fetch something from upstairs or work late for a school assignment, the printer was upstairs in the study, I would dash up the stairs and try to finish everything as quickly as possible before dashing down again. The nightmares left as I got older, but I still had an ingrained sense of discomfort about the area. I would play this down to being the imagination of a child, but others in my family also have stories about the upstairs area. When I was younger, my uncle, a priest, had gotten engaged and was staying over at our house with his fiancée. Pre-expansion, our house wasn't very big, so his fiancée got the bedroom my brother and I shared. We slept in the downstairs lounge and my uncle slept in the upstairs lounge. I didn't find this out until much later. I'm guessing my parents didn't want to spook us, but my uncle had woken up struggling for air with the distinct feeling that hands had been wrapped around his neck. Now the theory was that this was somehow related to his fiancée, since my mother, who's quite sensitive, had gotten a bad feeling about her, and also because she and my uncle had spent the whole time fighting, before she eventually got my dad to drive her to a bus station, never to be heard from again. Time went on, and nothing noteworthy occurred upstairs, even with my brother and I sometimes pulling all-nighters playing video games up there. Until about 2 years after I moved out. I went to visit my parents one day, and my dad and mom both seemed rather unsettled. Apparently, the previous evening, my dad had been sitting in the downstairs lounge, which was right next to the stairwell going to the upstairs lounge, when he heard my brother's voice calling his name quite loudly. He called back, "Yes," before he received the response, "Ah." This is noteworthy because my brother usually sits upstairs raging while playing Warzone, and my parents often complain about his choice of language and screams. So my dad obviously went upstairs to check that my brother wanted. But when he got there, it was empty. He clicked that my brother was at his girlfriend's house for the night. Since moving out, I spent very little time thinking about my childhood home, but every now and again I remember these occurrences. Hopefully you all enjoyed these. I've got a lot more of my mother's stories to tell. Her childhood home was on the grounds of an old prison. My grandfather on my dad's side lived with us until he passed when I was 7 years old. Not only did he suffer from dementia, but a couple of years prior, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. In the last couple of years of his life, it came to a point where he would get physically violent, so I wasn't allowed to be near him unless someone was with me. Anyway, late at night when I was sleeping, I would hear him knocking on his bedroom walls, and I remembered that right after he would knock, either my dad or my mom would go to his room. So I assumed that was his way of getting their attention when he needed help. Then months before he passed, it was getting harder for him to breathe, so he was constantly coughing. Eventually, I got used to hearing him coughing and knocking every night. Finally, the day came and he passed in his sleep. We held his funeral not long after. A week had passed and it was maybe an hour after my mom put me to bed. I was just about to fall asleep when I heard knocking coming from his room. At first I just ignored it because I figured I was imagining it. Also, because he'd been doing that for months, I thought my mind was just playing with me, since I would hear his knocking around that time. However, the knocking kept happening every night for about 4 months. I didn't tell my parents because at the time I was only 7, and I even thought I was just imagining it since I was still in mourning after his death. Now, I'm 22 years old and next month is the anniversary of his death. I went to visit my parents to ask if they're still planning on visiting his grave. As we were remembering him, my mum asked if I had any memories of him since I was young at the time. I told them a few things that I remembered, but then I finally told them what happened after his death. I told them how I kept hearing the knocking and coughing from his room. After I explained everything to them, they both looked at me like deers caught in the headlights. That's when my dad finally told me that he and Mum would hear the same thing after he was gone. In fact, my mother told me that the night of his funeral, She got out of bed because she heard him knocking. It wasn't until she was right outside his door that she remembered he was gone. And whenever my siblings and I were at school and Mom was back at work, my dad would hear coughing coming from his room for hours. It got to a point where even the pets would act weird around his room. Our dogs refused to go into the room alone, and the cat would always scratch at the door if it was closed. I asked why they never told me because I thought I was the only crazy one. That's when they told me that the reason they didn't say anything was because they didn't want to scare me, which honestly was probably for the best. When I was 3 years old, apparently by my parents' words, I was super polite. Like shaking hands with older people and hugging everyone and that kind of politeness. They taught me to say hello to everyone, and they said I did it with literally everyone, even waiters at restaurants. Well, one time, my mum had to take me to her office to pick up some stuff. When we got down there, I started saying hello to every one of her co-workers until her boss showed up. He was super nice, and he got on his knees to shake my hand, but I ran petrified behind my mum's legs. She was of course extremely embarrassed and started to reprimand me for not saying hi. She said that she pushed me to the front of her so I could say hello to her boss, but this time I started crying. She started to apologise to her boss, who only laughed at the situation, told her not to worry, and continued walking. When we went into her office, she asked me what was wrong. Why did I act that way when I always said hi and they teach me good manners? I said, I never want to see that yellow man again. He was super scary. My mum thought this was weird and investigated online what that meant. One webpage said little kids sometimes see people's aura and that colour yellow could mean that the person was about to die. She didn't give too much importance to the matter and continued with her day. 2 days later, she receives a phone call saying that her boss died in a plane crash in El Salvador and passed away. To this day, she still reminds me of the story and it gives me goosebumps. I woke up this morning and had my terrified girlfriend sitting next to me, barely any sleep, explaining what took place over the course of the night. I'd also like to point out I'm terrified of thunderstorms and have PTSD, so I'm used to having nightmares. Last night, I fell asleep on one of the couches in the living room. No big deal until I sat up and looked at my girlfriend, telling her they're coming, then returning to sleep on the couch. A little while later, I sat up and tried to walk out the door, when my girlfriend stood in front of the door and tried to get me to go back to bed. As I tried to reach around her, I looked her in the eyes and told her if you don't let them in, they'll kill us. She managed to wake me up and we went to bed in the bedroom. While in the bedroom, I was sleeping with my eyes open for a while and activity began to pick up. There was a storm outside, which usually would cause me a lot of anxiety. I was sleeping and my girlfriend was on the phone on social media and cracked her wrist. When she did so, I grabbed her wrist. She looked at me and began to ask if I was okay, but I shushed her and said, they hear us, and then proceeded to check her hands. I followed up with, you're not marked. You can't come with if you're not marked, and sat up, trying to leave the room alone. She woke me up again because she was terrified. I had no recollection. I wasn't even dreaming. Eventually, I fell back asleep with my eyes open. Every time the thunder rolled, I stared at my girlfriend in the eyes and gave her a grin, which is completely out of character. At some point she closed my eyes and they remained closed. She thought it was all over and returned to her phone. I began flinging my body around in my sleep, as if trying to escape something until I froze, back arched, arms and legs pinned down, screaming and crying, begging whoever I was seeing not to kill me. She woke me up and I jolted out of bed, sobbing. I refused to tell her about the nightmare for a good 5 or 10 minutes. I just sat there sobbing. After sharing my nightmare with her, we both took turns going to the bathroom with the other standing in the doorway to make each other feel safe. It was then that she saw the scratch going from one side of my stomach near my hip to the other side of my stomach near my ribs. It was tender to touch. We did an incense cleanse of the room and I complained of feeling sick and heavily chested with a terrible night migraine. I took some Tylenol and grabbed a trash can just to be safe. Every time she touched me, I complained that her touch was extremely hot. We laid back down and talked a little about happy things to try to change what my mind was focusing on before falling asleep. As I was falling asleep, I told my girlfriend that I was afraid to close my eyes because every time I do, I see a dark lady. We brushed it off to just being the direction I was laying, with the lighting making figures on my eyelids. I slept through the night no problem, but every time my girlfriend tried falling asleep, she felt a jolt in her leg. To say the least, she didn't sleep much or well. We woke up this morning and the dried orange garland we hung around the living room months ago was ripped down on one wall. What the heck happened? What should we do now? I remember nothing, but it terrified my girlfriend, so I'd like to make her feel better. We're open to any suggestions.